Now we cut to Luke and June, and June's just mowing down on dinner.
I thought she was eating alone. I started my notes by writing June's eating alone because it's that very familiar shot of her just sitting by herself eating the cereal. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, look at her. She's so pleased with herself. And then, yeah, Luke's there. And I was like, oh, that's even more awkward because I really thought she was eating alone. And here he is, but we're going to have an awkward mealtime.
So I wanted to point out that she is eating in front of whatever the thing with the holes is. I did like it. There's the whole holy lights. I don't know what I want to call them. They're not holy lights. They're lights that look like holes. And it reminds me of when she was in the box. So I don't know if those were there on purpose or not. Hell, as far as I know, that shit could get edited out, and I didn't see a goddamn thing. But what I got out of it was that they're still trying to signify that June, in her head, is always in that box. She can't leave the box, and that is the main goddamn problem. Everything is still super fresh. She hasn't done enough healing. And Luke apologizes for coming today, but now that he knows everything, does this mean we can just move on? Like, I'm sure that you could move on, but buddy, she can't move on yet, and you don't know everything.
And he doesn't even kind of know everything. That's what drove me crazy. I'm like, one little statement in a courtroom is not even sort of knowing 7 years of torture.
That did it for you?
Oh my gosh, see, I didn't read that as him saying let's move on now because I know everything. I read this as him being hey, I've started to hear this, so I read it as him trying to open up a dialogue, being we can talk about this now. Anytime you want to talk, we can communicate now because now I have some idea of what you went through, and now you don't have to be scared to confide in me about this because at least now I have at least now I have the outline of what you've been through. So
that would have been really nice if he said that, but he didn't. He said, now I know everything and we can move on. And whatever he meant is fine because that's what June heard, and ouch.
Yeah.
That's just, it's such a slap in the face. That word choice
wasn't adequate for her.
Terrible.
It wasn't
it's not adequate. It's not adequate at all, but I see where Luke was at least trying to go with this.
Yeah.
Where I see the attempt that's being made there.
Yeah, there's always attempts. He tries every time, but...
Oh, he does. Poor Luke. This guy is full of, noble attempts at things. But this one just falls flat. And I think it kind of immediately put her on the defensive because she's like, oh, fuck. Now he's expecting a conversation, which she's not ready to have. But he's saying, oh, now we can do this. And she's like, no, because she's not there yet. This is her healing journey.
I feel it's kind of, it feels to her, it must feel like he's saying, so tomorrow when you wake up, you'll be a little happier. We can start moving on. And there's just so much. And she's not even ready to have the conversations to get him to the place where he's going to understand even close to everything. We said it when we heard her testimony that, wow, I can't believe how much of the psychological torture she left out, because this is very factual, but it's not even close to what she's endured to turn her into the person that she is now. And so for him to think that hearing that will therefore be the first step, yeah, it's the first step, but it's the first step of many, and he makes it sound like they have just crossed the finish line.
Yes, I will agree with you on that. That's kind of how I took it too, and I was just like, oh boy, this is not going to go over all that.
And I know I'm saying he doesn't have good intentions, but it's just not, it's really missing the mark for her, and then it's going to set off the rest of this conversation. The fact that they can't communicate is because they can't communicate. This is just clear. They are talking, and they're going to need a lot more time and a lot more understanding. And once again, they're going to need a lot more mental health therapists to come in there and ease June through her own trauma so she can begin to coexist with Luke.
So after, the apologies and the them kind of talking past each other about the situation, Luke does the right thing because he lets her know that he's here. But then June looks like she's stealing herself again. You can see that internal collection of how to proceed as he's breaking down a little bit. He's trying and and she's holding him. She doesn't know what to do or what to tell him. There is too much inside her, so she opts for what she knows best. Sex. She kisses him. It's more insistent. Obviously, sex is going to change the subject, right? So we don't have to talk about the icky things like feelings. And she's very insistent. Honestly, she really kind of has taken on like that stereotypical masculine role of being the grabby, insistent one. And he tells her very forcefully, like, stop. He's mad. He does not want a replay of whatever happened the night before or whenever it was. He wants her to talk. Like, just talk. And this is some amazing acting right here because her face changes so subtly. Like, it was almost imperceptible. There is like this mask that comes on her face. And that mask was the Gilead face of hatred.
Yeah.
That's a face that Luke has not seen yet. But that's a face she pretty much wore the last 3 seasons.
Yeah. Yep.
Luke doesn't know what to do with this.
Right. Well, I think it's both of them not knowing what to do with this because we know that everything that we've seen from June, it's that face, which you're 100% right. Luke has no idea who that person is, but we're so familiar with exactly that tiny imperceptible change of her face. And then on top of that, we see that June is always what she's done best in Gilead is figure out what the other person that she's working with or needs to survive under his roof, like Waterford, Lawrence. Every time she's got to try to figure out what they want so she can survive. And I think she really tries to figure out, like, she tries to go a different route with Luke at first. Like, I really thought they were going to have a nicer moment for a minute. And it was just like it was too much and she didn't know where to begin, or I don't, it was just all too much is the only way I can describe it. It's too much emotional work at that point. It would be easier to shift his attention elsewhere.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on this. Like when he's holding his head and she sighs and she gets up and Luke is teary-eyed saying, "I'm trying." Like, it does seem like they're on the precipice of having like a genuine nice moment and almost what feels like could be a breakthrough. And I agree with you wholly when you say it just all feels like it's too much. And that's when June reverts to kissing him and trying to like unzip his pants. Because that's the only coping mechanism that she knows with how to deal with someone in a case like this. And ultimately, it's not June's responsibility to teach Luke how to deal with her trauma. Because he has had all of the time, not all of the time in the world, but he has had plenty of time to like work with counselors and like kind of educate himself as to what could possibly happen and what kind of trauma she could have gone through and how to cope with that and how to be there for her. And he's tried to do that in the ways that he in whatever ways he can, but he's not there yet. And June very much can't be there to hold his hand because she's still working through the trauma. So she can't teach him how to cope with her trauma because she's still trying to figure out how to work through it herself. So totally agree with you. Like with it, like it all feeling like it's too much and her reverting back to that.
I'm wondering what we're going to see out of their relationship from here on out. This was a really difficult episode for them in a different way than it was the last episode. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting how June's way to see around the ickiness of the feelings talk was sex. I'm wondering, is she going to just straight up have issues with men in general, or at least the men that are close to her, now that she's Canada's side?
Yeah.
Because I feel like in her doing this path of least resistance thing, she was treating him like she expects him to just accept that like any other man would. Mm-hmm. Like that's the currency that's going to work here.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it worries me because Luke is not all other men. He is not another Gilead pig that she has to deal with. He's not trying to oppress her. He might be clueless in that like dude kind of way that, a lot of guys are. I mean, I'm married to one. He's not clueless. He has his moments though. But you know what? So do I. We're all a little clueless sometimes. I don't know. I just wonder if June is going to come out of this with some hang-ups about men and she's going to be directing those hang-ups towards Luke.
I mean, I certainly think that has to be what's happening here to some extent. But I think I looked at it a little bit more of that reaction because it is Luke and there is a memory, it's been 7 years, but this is her husband. And so they do have memories and an intimacy. And I feel like it was almost her way of being like, here, I'm going to give you what you want, which is probably, at least, not that Luke's pushing for it, but I'm sure she's picking up on the fact that he probably does want to be more intimate and hug her. Like, remember when the second he touched her ear, she left, but he was like, he had wanted to continue, and then he felt bad, and it was this whole thing. And so I think this was her way of deflecting for sure, and probably deflecting in a way in which Gilead and men have changed the way she reacts is definitely playing into it as well. But I also think it was that insistence on sex was also just because it is her husband. It's probably something that she thinks she's giving him that he wants. Not because he's any man, but because he is Luke. And she's like, look, here, husband, I'm going to have this intimacy with you because I can't go there with you yet on the emotional stuff. But this I could handle.
Yeah, you can't have the emotional intimacy, but you can have the physical intimacy. Yeah. I also want to point out that, like, in episode 6, Vows, when June and Luke are having their moment outside of the condo when June's moving in, and June's talking about, like, disappointing him and, like, what if I turn out to not be who you want me to be? And Luke says, then I'll just love whoever you turn out to be, which I thought was such a sweet line in the moment. And then moving forward to this episode, when he's tearing up and wiping away tears and trying to steel himself, and he says, I'm trying. I think, like, it's with him saying I'm trying, it's twofold. It's not just him saying I'm trying to help you with your trauma, but I think it's also him saying I'm trying to love the person that you have become. And that's why it's such a struggle for him as well. And I think that because we get we're privy to that flashback and we see that, I feel like June does sort of remember him saying that, or like subconsciously. So I think that the understanding there is, which is why, like, she does go to kiss him immediately after that. She does try to like unzip his pants, is like she's acknowledging that, like, he's not just trying to help with the dialogue and to help with, like, opening up, but also trying to, like, show that, like, his efforts in him loving her, whoever she has become, they're not in vain. Like, so I think that she's, like, hearing him and kind of acknowledging that in the only way that she can at present, because she is still working through her trauma, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
She's so broken. I also feel like it might have been kind of her offering herself up to him in that way because she doesn't feel like she has anything to offer on the inside.
Yeah. Right.
There's a lot of pain there.